many different, more than that, countries, and it's hopefully going to be a lively conversation featuring some video work that each of us have done. So what I'm going to be sharing, and this is being recorded, so everyone knows. And the videos that we're presenting will also be available offline. Instead of going around and reading people's bios, what I am going to do, Ariel, who really, I'm technically chair, and that's a perfunctory role, because really Ariel Avissar is the ringleader of us all on this in many ways that we'll talk about in a minute. But he compiled the bios from all of us. So I always hate hearing people just sort of read and mispronounce things in people's bios. So you can go ahead and click on this link and read who we are at your leisure. But to really hear why we're here, I want to turn it over to Ariel, who is going to talk a little bit about the TV Dictionary Project and then share the videos that our Roundtable folks have created. There's one member of our roundtable who unfortunately is not here, Evelyn Kreutzer. She's ill, but we are going to feature her video in the compilation and talk about it. But she won't be able to present and discuss her own work. So, Ariel.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. So we're here today to present the TV Dictionary, which is a collaborative project that I started last summer, I think almost exactly 1 year ago. The basic idea is very simple. Each video in the collection attempts to capture the essence of a TV series using a single word in a video that combines the dictionary definitions of the word with a clip or several clips from the series. So that was the basic concept. I made a few videos of my own as an example, and then I invited other people to join in, and they did. As of today, there are 51 videos in the project. There are a couple more on the way that I know of, made by about 25 different people so far. So it's quite diverse, both in terms of the series and the kind of videographic genres that were applied, as we'll see a sample of soon. Some of these people are people who've never made a video essay before, and some of them are very experienced makers. This project received some mention in the latest Sight and Sound Best Video Essays end of year poll, and it is also featured in a series of blog posts on the CST online blog, which we can see. I'll put a link to that in the chat soon. So we'll see 5 examples. We'll watch them together as one video. It's about 14 minutes long altogether. And then each person will say a few words about their video, and then we can open the floor to discussion. So I'm going to try to both share the video and put this link for anyone who would prefer watching it that way. Okay, so this is the link. And now I will try to play the video.
Excellent. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss in these videos, so we are going to hear from each of the creators in order of their videos. So, and then I'm going to say a few words. So we'll start with Libby.
Hi, thank you so much, Ariel, for having created this collection. It was so much fun to watch the videos right now. I love all of them. It's also great just to be here with all of you today because I really admire your work in video graphic criticism so much. So the video that I will discuss is the first one on Dairy Girls, which is the first video that I made in the collection. Afterwards, I made a second one that I'll discuss just very briefly at the end. The video is very simple. The video essay that I made is very simple. really, it's I guess the scene I selected was so powerful on its own that I felt that it did not need much interference or editing on my part. The scene itself already constructs this relationship between these two spaces and two generations, brought together by shared history, geography, and moment in time in Ireland specifically. And so my main addition to the scene was the introduction of text in the dictionary definitions. So the main decision I had to make after choosing the show and the scene and the word itself, which we could all discuss, this question of what is the essence, how to summarize the essence of a show in one word. I think there are many words that can describe the essence of a show or of a scene. So there's a decision that goes into choosing that word, of course. And then to choose where to place the definitions along the video. So this was a question of watching the scene several times and trying placing the definitions in different moments along the scene before deciding that it worked. Aspects to consider included the relationships that would be created between the definition and the images. And in my video, I think that's the main relationship that is formed, is between the image of the scene, which I really did not touch, and the words themselves and the definition, the text, right? So this relationship between image and text. So I had to think about the time that it would take to read the text and how this would impact the experience of seeing the image. So there's the question of how to manage doing two things at once, which is often, I think, a question that we think about when making a video essay, in this case, seeing and reading. And finally, the rhythm of the montage of the sequence in itself, and it is a desire not to interrupt that internal rhythm, but rather add another layer to it through the text. While I made the video, many questions emerged that I was able to explore further in the next video that I made for I Love Lucy. And this is mostly the question of, I was thinking a little bit about, oh, am I making publicity for Dairy Girls? Is this free publicity that I'm making for the show? So I thought, okay, for my next video essay, I don't want it to be able to be confused with publicity. I'm going to do something different. And I wanted to be a bit more critical in the construction that I would be able to make between the text, the definitions, and the images. So in this case, for I Love Lucy, I chose the word marriage, and I used definitions from Baker's Evangelical Dictionary of Biblical Theology. So this allowed me, as opposed to Webster's dictionary, for example, or Harper or Collins that I used in Dairy Girls. So this dictionary allowed me to use a text that could be unreliable or questionable, and which would offer a more critical experience, I thought, for the spectator. And so I played with fonts as well in the second video, which I didn't do in the first one. And all of this is really to say that I was also very inspired by the videos that I was watching that are part of the collection, because I think that we all started making and seeing what everybody else was making. And of course, I feel like, well, at least for me, I was very inspired by what I was seeing. So playing with the fonts became an option for me in the second video, which I hadn't really done in the first, with the design of the show, with the credits of I Love Lucy, which are so much fun as well, with the hearts and the cursive. And so there was more editing involved with the second video. I cut the scene, choosing the moments I wanted. I cut to black for the definitions, creating an interruption in the image. I became more aware of the sound of the show itself, like in Ariel's video essay, the laughing track and how that was used in the show, as well as more aware of like the facial gestures of Lucille Ball in the scene. And I guess I'm talking more about the I Love Lucy video essay, but it's just to say that I think that you can make these in so many different ways and forms, and that's what's so much fun about the collection itself. And for me, it was just it was a very attractive prompt to make an essay for this collection. And yeah, I just think that really has to do with Ariel, with your way of presenting the project and really making it in a way that would be so welcoming to us all. And you know, we haven't met in person yet, you know, but it was also a very positive way to to I think, expand this community of videographic critics and make it more of a community, perhaps, or having us all work on one single collection. Also, just to mention that the video essay, as Ariel mentioned, this came out last year, and we were in the middle of the pandemic, but also I was in the middle of writing my thesis. So this was just a really great distraction from more academic writing. So thank you for that, Ariel. And also for the pandemic as a way of creating community and feeling more in touch with people that you can't see in person. So I think that it was just a great way to spend that time actually thinking and making these videos together. I don't know if I spoke very quickly, but yeah, thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing the rest of you as well.
Thank you, Libby. Next up is Katie Grant.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks so much, Jason, and also Ariel, for putting this panel together. It's great to be at this conference as well. I'm a fan of CST online. I have many of the same thoughts as Libby, whose video was my personal favorite of the entire collection to date. So I'll talk a little bit about hers as well. We're all going to be full of gratitude to Ariel. It was great fun. This kind of exercise really works when it kind of prioritizes the fun aspect of it. I think it does remove all of those kind of heavyweight anxieties that often surround other forms of scholarly production. And for me, although I've been making videos for a long time, it definitely at a particular point in the pandemic got me back into making videos. I don't know why I'd got out of that habit, but for a little while I had, and it was something that I kind of wanted to return to my video editing software to make and to engage in this kind of collaborative, collective activity. What it reminded me of at the time was the kind of environment around 2004, 2005, 2006 of blogathons, which were a similar kind of collaborative exercise online that had a kind of they had more of a deadline, I guess, but this didn't have such a deadline. But it did have that sense of a kind of digital and networked connection between people who maybe half knew each other because you kind of knew some of the work of the other people as well. But it was something that you wanted to be involved in as a collective activity, being inspired by other people's work. So I echo all of those thoughts that Libby mentioned. With my video on Edge of Darkness, like Libby said, I chose a kind of approach that was simple and unadulterated, really, a kind of picking probably one of the most powerful scenes in a 6-part series from the 1980s. I'll come back to my choice of that series in a second, but I kind of was also drawn to the exercise because it was a version of what many of us call a videographic epigraph, or the epigraphic video, a form that I've been involved in developing, Jason's been involved in developing with Chris Keithley, and as part of the Middlebury exercises, the Middlebury workshop exercises for teaching video essay making. And for me, it's a great exercise in its kind of original form because it's such a great way of working within constraints. Sometimes people start to make video essays because they really want to, but they get overwhelmed by the form and by trying to express things in their own voice or their scholarly voice. Whereas removing that scholarly voice of your own and instead assembling found materials, especially ones that have this kind of verbal aspect of the epigraphic video, I think can be very powerful way of entering the terrain of making. In the epigraphic video, a quotation is chosen and is made to interact dynamically with a sequence or sequences from a film or TV show. And the captioning may happen, as with book epigraphs, at the beginning of the form or at the end of the form, or it may kind of happen during. Obviously, most of the TV dictionary entries use the during format, and it's that unfolding quality that I think works particularly well. I think most brilliantly in Libby's, really, because it's so surprising the way that definition unfolds to encapsulate not just the sequence but the series, which was one of the things that I most loved about it. But this form, the epigraphic form here used in the TV dictionary exercise, is kind of like a relatively open form of poetic framing for a work as well. And so it kind of opens up this gap. Libby kind of alluded to this as well, between the words and the sounds and images, which is why I often call epigraphic videos mini essay films. They're kind of like ones that are not literal, but they're almost literal. They contain two literal elements, but you're poised in between them as a spectator and also as a maker, and it can be quite a powerful form. I picked Edge of Darkness for this exercise because I kind of saw, like Libby, that had a publicity aspect to it. And for me, I was less interested in publicizing this wonderful series from the 80s. I'm more interested in making a fan work about it, because, you know, if I'm asked to say what my favorite TV show is, Edge of Darkness is usually one of the candidates for that. You know, it's also pretty widely known among TV scholars, but not very widely known online, I don't think. And I was really surprised to find there were no other YouTube clips of this series. The 1985 series. So for me, that kind of motivation of, that motivation of the publicity exercise was really significant. Sorry, my timer is now distracting me terribly, sorry. And I can come back to this in the discussion, but I wanted, in a way, to show that even in the mid-1980s, quality TV was certainly well underway, and kind of water cooler moments, which had a lot to do with the way that this show was screened in the two broadcasts in 1985. I wanted to encapsulate by having this incredibly edgy sequence. You know, we were really poised with this nuclear drama in a way that I don't think we had been before in the 80s. Anyway, I'll hand it on now. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. As I said at the beginning, for those who came late, unfortunately, Evelyn Kreutzer is unable to join us today in the physical or temporal present. She has, of course, joined us through her great dictionary entry on Fleabag, so that will certainly be still part of the conversation, and I'll say more about that in my response. So now, Johannes.
Yeah, thank you so much for like this opportunity and these opportunities. Also for like the whole TV dictionary theories. I would just like to use my 5 minutes to point out like 3 things that I want to highlight, and I just take my entry on Miami Vice as an illustration for that. But those are 3 things that I find particularly interesting for the TV dictionary project as a whole. The first is the condensation aspect. Now, my entry allowed me to kind of like condense a very long and actually still ongoing research on the one hand on repetition, but also on Miami Vice as a series in particular, as you maybe can tell also from my from the choice of my shirt that I'm probably obsessed with something like that. But also an interest in the psychoanalytic concept of the drive. So when I first heard, when I read your prompt, Ariel, for me it was immediately clear that I wanted to make a video on Miami Vice, and also I got really under pressure because I thought I really want to be the the first to do that, because I thought everyone would also choose the same word as I would. So it was really interesting, kind of like to condense the long durée of a research into kind of like, but not in the sense of like that it's the final word, but it's just like a sort of like, if I would have to get across what I'm interested in for a very long time, and in regard to that series and to seriality in general, and to the psychoanalytic concept of the drive, this was really nice. And of course, it's interestingly mirrored in the prompt that we also have to kind of like condense a whole series into one word. So I thought that was something that was particularly attractive. Now, the second aspect that I find so interesting is the discovery aspect, because although I have discussed and published on Miami Vice several times, and actually I have shown this very scene in numerous times, while working on this video, and this is always true for video essay work, I think, it allowed me to observe something that I've never observed before, namely that at one point in this sequence, we have a moment where the camera breaks the 180-degree rule. And that was kind of like, this was so fitting to like the point that I always thought about this scene, that actually they're not going anywhere, but it's just about like driving. So I just thought this is brilliant, that actually in one shot they move like in one direction, and actually also for a very long time they move like in the wrong direction. It's more like as if they were driving backwards, and then all of a sudden they're moving forward, and kind of like, and it was so interesting when I realized that how fitting that is, and I was just like surprised that it never occurred to me before, that I did not realize that there's this jump of the camera. And actually, I'm not sure anymore, but I think it was Claire Richards who actually then told me that she thought I had edited that I had included that wasn't even part of the actual sequence. So I just thought that was really an interesting discovery. Another discovery was like that when using the Phil Collins song, which actually plays over this scene, but also for reasons that I thought, for copyright reasons, I would use kind of like a different version. So I used the version without the actual singing, just the instrumental version. And just by doing that, and this was not conceptual when I first started it, but then when I did that, I just thought, well, that's actually an interesting effect, that you're constantly waiting for these lyrics to start that you're so familiar with, and it never starts. So I thought that's actually also really fitting this idea of kind of like an endless continuation. So the third and final aspect is then, and this actually also links to that, is the extension aspect. That I thought I find it particularly interesting with this prompt, that because the rules are so strict, and again, I also think that's also what I find so interesting about all your the Middlebury exercises. I think because the rules are so strict, they almost force me into moving away from these strict rules. So that was also a reason why I wanted to move away from just like the linguistic dictionary and then come to a Freudian and Lacanian dictionary. And I also think that's also something that Libby, that you mentioned, kind of like this moving away, choosing another dictionary than the ones that we would usually use. And I also think that's kind of like a really nice and intricate aspect of it, that it almost forces us to kind of like then of course also when we started watching these other entries on the TV dictionary, that it forced us to, okay, I would like to continue on that, but I don't want to replicate that, but I want to move, like how can I bend how can I bend this idea of an dictionary entry.
Excellent. Our final conversationalist is Ariel.
Thanks, Jason. I'll speak very briefly about my video and then maybe say a few more things like in general about the project as a whole. Well, the choice of word here was a no-brainer. The series literally gives you the word that you're supposed to use for this prompt, I guess. I'd made about 8 different entries altogether, I think. This is the last one of them so far. And most of the other ones kind of turned towards, 21st century prestige drama. I've got The Wire, I've got Lost, Breaking Bad, that sort of playground. So with Seinfeld, it was a very different, not just in terms of genre, but also in terms of, it wasn't a series that I encountered for the first time as a film scholar, but when I was a preteen, which is, I think, part of why I decided to go with a more playful approach this one. Most of my other entries are more traditional epigraphs. I actually played around with a few different ideas and eventually settled on that famous scene. This, for anyone who didn't recognize, that's the scene where George pitches to Jerry with the idea for the show about nothing from season 4. And because Seinfeld is very talk heavy, I just thought that it would be almost impossible to both listen to the dialogue and read the text. So I just removed the dialogue. That was kind of almost a technical necessity as far as it was concerned. And I also said that I was very surprised at how easily the laugh track composition fit in. I mean, I thought it would take a lot of hard work to make it sound like it's not just pasted on and artificial, which just highlighted the very artificiality of the form in itself, because it just worked together without even trying. So that was a nice kind of fun kind of material playing with formal televisual conventions. As people before me have already said, this was a very welcome diversion from a lot of different work-related and COVID-related issues. There was, I think it was July, or parts of July and parts of last August, where an average of one new video would turn up every day. It was really like a fad for those few weeks, which was very rewarding to see that so many people were taken up by this. And I would also say that I'm just going to place for anyone who wants to check out the entire collection, you can use this link. It's also interesting to note trends and similarities. And for example, there are some cases where two people made entries on the same series but used different words. So that's an interesting point of comparison. And actually, the most recent entry that was just submitted today is a case of a person using the same word but with a different series. So that was also nice to see. And you're welcome to, in your spare time, play around, browse for any shows you like and take a look. I'll end it there for now.
Great. Well, thank you all to the 5 makers of these videos. They were great to watch and think about, and now to hear what you have to say. When Ariel assembled this panel and invited me to be a respondent, I was really excited because I've been a fan of the project. Like to see how it unfolded. For a while, I watched from the sidelines thinking, I don't know how I might participate. Eventually, I came up with an idea, so I have one in the collection that Ariel linked to in that showcase. But then when I was trying to think, well, okay, so what can I say as a respondent about the project as a whole? I had a bunch of ideas, and then I listened to the episode of the Video Essay Podcast where Will DeGravio interviewed Ariel, and here's a link to that episode. And basically, Ariel and Will say everything that I wanted to say about the project as a whole, so I didn't want to repeat that. So I highly encourage, the Video Essay Podcast, I know Will is in the audience here, is a wonderful podcast overall, but this episode I think is particularly great in really diving deep into this both collection of videos and also, as everyone has suggested, a sort of community and a kind of ritual of practice, which is both really great as part of the videographic community, but also as sort of emblematic of television. So anyway, I was trying to figure out, well, how do I respond to this? And then, of course, the impulse is to make something, because the nature of videographic practice is very much focused on making. Some of you may know there's been reference to the Middlebury exercises here. So Chris Keithley and I and Katie Grant run a workshop that thankfully this year we've been able to reinstate, and it is happening right now down the hallway that way, where we have 15 people who are here learning how to make video essays and really experiment with videographic practice. And so I was sort of working with those folks last week and seeing them make something. So I was inspired to make my response to the work that my co-panelists did. So I am going to share my screen. It's also available online. I just put the link there, and then I will talk more. All right, let's see how this works. So I hope that worked. I've never actually shared in Teams before, so I was just in this black hole. I have no idea if you were able to see that. Hopefully they were, and again, the link is in the chat. So in doing this, you know, what the thing that I one of the main things I took away from the whole project, both the 5 videos we saw and the whole project of making these, both my response and the one that I made, is the way in which this set of parameters that Ariel has offered in very loose terms. They are not as prescriptive as we do in the Middlebury exercises. And just on that, if anyone is, you know, unaware of these, I'm pasting a online book that Katie, Chris Keithley, and I wrote and edited, and in this it lays out the various exercises, including examples. And actually the last 2 definitions of parameters were quoted from that book that I included in my video. Not exactly definitions, so like Johannes, sort of moving away from the strict sort of defining dictionary definition, but rather usage and assorted meanings. The other word I was toying with, besides parameter, was juxtaposition, and the meanings were not quite as relevant to the range of examples, but I really feel like that's very much at the core of videographic practice in general, and specifically in the TV dictionary. What this format does is it creates an interplay between various definitions of words and then various meanings in the clip, the sounds, the images, etc. And I think that what it yields is these productive, if unintended, connections and discoveries, right? And I think that this is the thing that, for me, as someone who has spent a lot of time writing traditional television scholarship, and in more recent years doing videographic criticism, this is the sort of value added that videographic criticism brings to the table, is the ability to discover something new without trying to. So I think Johannes's example of, you know, in playing with this Miami Vice clip, I show that clip in every intro to TV class I've ever taught, right? I've seen it dozens of times. But yes, you don't notice things when you're just watching it, but when you're actually breaking it apart in an editing platform, it transforms your connection to it. It makes it much more tactile. I often feel like I'm inside of a clip when I'm editing it in a way that is not how we operate as viewers. So, you know, both Libby and Katie talked about, like, one function of this is a promotion, right? You know, to promote a show and say, hey, watch this is interesting. So I'm going to take this just as promotion of, hey, make some videos. If you haven't done it, try it. It's really transformative. If you are a more sort of traditional written critic, don't throw that away, but try making videos as a new way to understand your practice. The other thing I think that this format really highlights, and videographic criticism in general highlights, that's specific to television, is the importance of temporality. I've certainly written, and many people in the audience have written and explored how much television is tied to temporality. The television schedule, seriality is a property of temporality, the ritual of viewing. And what videographic criticism does is it adds temporality to the actual expression and creation of criticism in a new way, because each of the videos that you watched controlled how long it took to engage with it and how it manipulated the temporality of the original footage. So in Libby's case, you didn't manipulate the temporality, right? It was a clip that was sort of run throughout. I think Ariel's as well for the most part. You know, and whereas you know, Evelyn's piece on Fleabag, it actually radically distilled the series. I believe there are clips from the first episode of Fleabag and definitely from the last episode of Fleabag, right? So it's taking that all and compressing it into a few minutes. But then there's this sort of critical layer in which the way in which we experience the words and you know, through the TV Dictionary Project, that's the sort of critical voice and the juxtaposition of these. Each person uses temporality in different ways that I think is really exciting and interesting and creative. And so for me, as a critic, as a maker, I mean, that's one of the things that I think is most powerful about this form. And with very sort of limited palette that the dictionary format gives you, using temporality and juxtaposition within these parameters, to me, is the really excitement that happens. So I just want to end by thanking Ariel for inventing this form and encouraging and you know, thanking my co-panelists for making examples of it, and encourage everyone who's in the audience today to try it. You know, this is a great way to get your hands dirty for the first time as a videographic critic. It's pretty straightforward. The community is incredibly generous. So if you reach out to any of us, we can give you some tips on how to move forward. And perhaps we can have a conversation right now that includes that. So thank you to my co-panelists and thanks to the audience. And let's go ahead and open the conversation. So, I believe that, again, I'm a Teams novice, but I believe that under the reactions icon on your interface, there is a raise hand function. So if people raise hands, I will see them, hopefully, and I can call on you. And I see that, and I apologize for all the mispronunciations of names that might occur. So, Eleni?
That was very diplomatic. You got it right. Thank you. What a fun and insightful and great panel, and it works. So glad to see all of them. I think I have two questions. One was partly kind of addressed, I think, by you, Jason, when you talked about what this exercise, the TV dictionary, adds to our understanding of TV as a medium. So I don't want to use the word televisuality because it will take us probably somewhere else, but and you talked about temporality, which is very interesting, and I was thinking of that while I was watching all these videos. I wonder though how then it's different from the temporality of the cinematic, because you can do, I guess, the same with videographic essays that use film. So I'm not saying that we necessarily need to find something that, you know, a meaning that is, or an understanding, something that enhances the our understanding of the TV, of how what it adds, what this adds to our understanding of television as a specific medium. I'm just throwing it out there to kind of, you know, follow on from what you were saying, Jason. The second one, question or comment, if you want to pick it up, is about what I think Libby kind of alluded to, and it's about the TV dictionary, but the dictionary itself, the source. I think, and I'm not familiar with all the videos, a lot of them use what is the source? The Webster dictionary. And I'm thinking, and I was interested to hear, Libby, what you said about I Love Lucy, and you kind of try to reach out to a different type of source for your dictionary, something that maybe de-westernizes the kind of use the source and maybe the terminology and the words and the use, what you choose to use. So just maybe if the panel has some thoughts on how to extend the sources in terms of where you go to find these words you want to use in the video, apart from the usual ones we can all find by Googling. Yeah, that's all. Thank you so much again, all. Lovely to see you, Katie, but everyone, but just want to say that to Katie because, yeah, great.
Thanks, Eleni. Great to see you.
Great. Two excellent questions. Any of the panelists want to dive in on either or both? Johannes.
Yeah, perhaps the question of temporality and what may be specific about like temporality of television. And of course, I mean, that's I mean, there are so many people have already worked on that, but that was very much also something that interested me, and also in my choice of series, that those are very much series that are not so much like the second one that I did was on Patent Place, and there it was very much about kind of like repetition. It was actually I think that was even the word that I chose. No iteration, exactly. So to kind of like this idea of like the circular movement, and that it's not so much moving somewhere, but kind of like going in circles. So in a way, I also found now by rewatching them, I also find it really interesting that both in Libby's case and also in Katie's case, what I now, by watching them again, what I find so particularly striking also in Edge of Darkness is then this cut to another place, that you included this moment from like the end credits that is for me very much kind of like this idea, because before that it could also be a movie scene, but this, just with this cut, I get the feeling of like, no, it's more about kind of like things will repeat, they will continue, there will be a next episode. It's not really going somewhere so much, but rather it's kind of like moving in circles.
Katie, I saw your hand. Was that a...
Yeah, thanks. And great, because I can come in and immediately take up Johannes's point there, which is absolutely, and I think I did that quite consciously. It was also part of my fandom, because I couldn't possibly make a video about Edge of Darkness and not have the music. But the music would have distracted if I'd used it during the scene. It would have been, you know, kind of wouldn't have worked at all. So I absolutely wanted it there. And I wanted something that paid tribute to the screenwriter or scriptwriter, Troy Kennedy Martin, as well. To go back to Eleni's point, of course, the difference of television and the prominence of the screenwriter, obviously now the contemporary showrunner, but Troy Kennedy Martin was a screenwriter showrunner figure in relation to Edge of Darkness. And I, again, couldn't complete my video without, in some sense, kind of rewarding and acknowledging his authorship. You made the point, Eleni, about broadening sources. And I absolutely think that the TV Dictionary project has done that. You know, in a way, a lot of the kind of like most popular contemporary shows are represented, but many of us have kind of chosen, maybe made quite sort of natural choices or pointed ones away from that kind of contemporary quality TV canon, and in my case tried to sort of broaden the historical scope, as Johannes did as well, I guess, with Miami Vice. And there's been a sort of, Ariel will be able to tell you more about the range of shows, but there's been quite a good geographical spread. Obviously that could be better. But in 2019, Jaap Kooijman and I edited the audiovisual essay section of Nexus, the European Journal of Media Studies, and we focused on audiovisual essays about television, very much in the spirit of Jason's work on TV and his urging of people to kind of turn to videographic criticism for TV studies. And one of the observations we made was not about the temporal difference of television, although of course that's absolutely central, but actually one more about the ordinariness of television. And in a way, what a lot of scholars had done in the turn to videographic criticism, and I point to myself in this, you know, is that we are cinephiles, we are fetishists, and we have made fetishistic studies of films for a long time. And maybe the kind of urge to do that with television you know, needed some time to happen. You know, and I know in my choice of Edge of Darkness, I did choose something I'm relatively fetishistic about as well. So, but yeah, I think that the move to television in videographic criticism is hugely important, and it's mirrored by a move to looking at audiovisual digital media too.
If I can just jump in a couple quick things. I mean, one that I agree that the sort of the videographic world has been primarily focused on cinema, and many of us in this room or space have made both, right? But have made many more about film potentially. And I think that, so for me at least, like the temporality, one of the main focuses on temporality when you're doing videographic work about television is just the corpus that you're choosing from, right? So my TV dictionary entry, and I have a larger project I'm working on Breaking Bad, where it's, I have 60 hours of footage that was released over a 5-year period. And like in the TV dictionary entry I made, there are images next to each other of Walter White from season 1, the pilot, and Walter White from one of the very last episodes. And so temporality is literally through spatial montage seen in that moment. In terms of the sources, I mean, one thing I think that there's just to like extend the call of this project, I mean, I would love to see entries in languages other than English. Ariel, have you gotten any? I can't remember. So far, no. There's no reason why it has to be in English, of course. There have been a few entries that are about, ordinary television. And there's I forget who wrote the blog post talking about that, about was it about the American Bandstand entry? Ariel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, that was Tomer Nechustan from my own institution about American Bandstand. We also have a couple more entries about reality TV. There are a few about non-English speaking series, but the word is in English. There's one entry that has the definitions in English and also in German, I believe one of Oswald Aiton's entries, if I remember correctly. I would also say that to the question of temporality and televisuality, the fact that during those few weeks last summer where each day a new episode of the TV Dictionary would come out, I think it somehow kind of replicated the communal experience of waiting for the next one and then discussing it together with the community. So that was an interesting aspect of it. And as for television versus film, I would say that yes, this theoretically could be applied to film as well, but I think it's no accident that it's caught on specifically as a TV minded prompt. There's something on the one hand maybe more challenging about trying to whittle down an entire 60 hours of footage or maybe more into one word, and it's also maybe a good excuse to get into videographic TV work, where it was very daunting before, but now you have a specific excuse and a motivation, a kind of, again, communal motivation to try to do something with it. So I think that's why it's caught on.
Libby, you want to jump in?
Thank you. I just wanted to share another characteristic of the collection that I thought was interesting is, and that doesn't happen with all video essay work, is how immediate it was shared online. So we would make the videos and then just in a few days it would already have an audience. And for me, that was just, I mean, I think that was part of the thrill also of making them, is knowing that you would have this kind of feedback right away, and that was very interesting to see. And I think it was when Katie, when you shared it, when you shared my video, someone commented asking about the credits for the dictionary definitions, because in that first version, I didn't give credit to the dictionary. And so I think a friend of yours said, oh, but who, where are these definitions from? And so that that made me think about, you know, there's a dictionary here, there's a writer, there's someone who has written this definition, and I am like ignoring this person's work and not giving credit to it. So I think that got me to think more about which dictionary I would be using. And also Johannes' video as well uses other definitions from other sources that are not Webster's or Collins. So yeah, thanks for that question.
Other questions from the group? Elka, I saw your hand, but is no longer there. But is it back?
I can come back with another question. One of the questions that I had, you've already answered, so gone, which was about, you know, different, what kind of shows do you have in the dictionary? And it's good to hear that there's reality TV and other programs there as well. But one of the things that I'm wondering about as well is, you know, when you watch television, you know, or at least when you watch television's linear television, and I find watching linear television is a real pleasure itself that is different from streamed television. You have a combination of different programs, obviously, delivered to you in a particular way. Is there a way that the TV dictionary could engage with that as well? Because at the moment it's very program focused, isn't it? It's not schedule focused, it's not flow focused.
That sounds like a challenge. Someone to make a flow-based TV dictionary entry. Stay tuned, is my guess. Someone, whether it's someone on the panel or someone in the audience, probably will rise to that. But as far as I know, it is very much single program, single word is the model that has been in place. But again, there's nothing written in stone because Ariel's parameters are very loose and open. Johannes?
I mean, just to riff on that, what you brought up, Elke, I think what is so interesting, I presented the TV dictionary a project also to high school teachers that were like wondering how to kind of like work with TV series in their class. And then we had an interesting discussion, and it links to what you said about like this question of like the schedule, that we of course also realized that we have these TV shows now that we watch kind of like in a rush, and it really has kind of like a trip quality, but we have a very hard time to remember what actually happened in that show. And so I thought that was in itself also an interesting, that would be for me also be an interesting question, that perhaps some of those shows that I would wonder, can you make a TV dictionary entry about, I mean, for example, if you would now try to do one on Queen's Gambit, I wonder, will it, or perhaps we can observe that how important it actually was, kind of like the situation in which we saw a TV series. How long does it take for us to form like this concept of like one word in relation to a TV series? And does this really, and what are the different affordances? So I have no answer to that, but I think that's a really interesting question, and that will be kind of like in a long run would be interesting perhaps to take the TV dictionary entries as a kind of like that would be like the meta information about it, just like kind of like what kind of shows are chosen by what kind of scholars or fans, and in what time, and how long after the show has been shown, the show has actually been shown, will the TV dictionary entry be made, and things like that.
Any other thoughts on this aspect of temporality? See a question here from Daniel.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, it's my first time using Teams as well, and also my first experience through the TV dictionary of making video graphic criticism. So I just wanted to thank Ariel and for the chance, and you've also been really helpful in just emailing and advice about these things as well. So thanks so much, and I really hope to kind of meet all of you again. So Jason, I really appreciate the fact that we can contact you. I'd really love to pick your brains about some of these ideas, Ariel and Katie as well. And to sort of come off the back of Johannes about this idea of temporality, I just wondered if anyone here who's made something for this project has experienced a kind of pressure to get something out for a particular number. Was there a particular number in the TV dictionary that you wanted to get? I'm thinking, for example, if anyone was doing the Hitchhiker's Guides to the Galaxy, number 42 would have been perfect. But are there plans for something for number 100? Maybe the show, The 100, for example. I just wondered if anyone else experienced that kind of pressure. I know I wanted to get something done for number 50 and I had an idea, but knew it would be a rush job and decided not to go for it in the end.
I'm wondering, I'm looking at the showcase, and the numbers are not apparent. I was trying to remember, Ariel, were you overtly numbering them at one point, or?
Well, I kind of just numbered them as I was publishing them. So the number doesn't really match what's on the showcase, because I made a few and I intended for them to be the first like 6, but then other people have made theirs before I could put those out. So the numbers are kind of arbitrary, I guess. But that is an interesting idea of using this arbitrary numbering system to make meaning. Hasn't happened yet, but definitely could play around with that.
Well, and one of the interesting things about a dictionary, if we think about it, is it's unlike a lot of other sort of compiled things, right? In which it has a predefined order, alphabetical, right? And the showcase is organized temporally. So actually, I think that it should. I would vote to that it reaches a point in which it should be reorganized alphabetically to sort of follow the logic of the dictionary. And then the question is it organized by the word or by the program, right?
Mm. Well, for technical reasons, I suppose it would maybe only be able to be organized by the Vimeo file name, by the video name, title. And that's basically by the show name, but not in every single case. So it would be a poorly organized dictionary order, I guess.
Other questions and comments?
I mean, just quickly, I really think there was not necessarily like a temporal pressure in kind of like hitting an exact like entry number, but I really had the experience that kind of like when it started, it was really also kind of like a rush for everyone who participated. And I just, in my case, I just thought, again, like Miami Vice, I have to get this in early, because I don't know if I would be able to do another one on Miami Vice if someone else already has done this. And it was kind of just, it was really interesting this summer that kind of like the TV dictionary was kind of like the videographic place to be. Everyone wanted to participate in that. And I felt it was kind of like, and I had telephones from like colleagues that said, look, I'm working on something, what do you think about that? And so there certainly was a kind of like this kind of like a TV program feel to the whole, also to the whole project.
Sarah has a question.
Thank you. Hi. Yes. So basically, this is just a very grateful comment. This was amazing. Thank you for this. I have absolutely no experience making video essays, but I recently discovered, I think it was on Just TV, a videographer called Grace Lee, and there was one video about Adventure Time, and I had no idea that I could get so emotional watching a video essay. And so now I really want to get into this, and it's great. I wrote all your names down, and I'm gonna, chase you all up. And I guess and my question is also very, the question of a dilettante, just for anyone, do you have any tips, any pieces of advice for someone who has never done this before? how to get it started. Would you, for example, would you say, do something about the research that you're doing right now, or take the pressure out of it and do something about something that you're not working on at all, although that would just add more work to what you're doing, but maybe it's a better idea. Any kind of time frame for the first video? Should it be really short? Anything and any thoughts would be appreciated. Thank you.
I mean, I can tell you the advice that we gave to folks who are doing the workshop in Middlebury right now, which is that when you're first learning this, one of the challenges, especially if you're a scholar, is that you try to do things with your brain, and we try to discourage that. You know, if you approach a video with an idea, and you're like, I have this idea, I have an argument that I want to make, and I want to put it in a video, I think that that defaults to something that's actually not particularly videographic. It's, you know, it's not writing with sounds and images. It is translating your writing into sounds and images. So we encourage people to experiment with a text, whether a film or TV show, that they know well, but they don't necessarily have an argument to make about it. So then you can make your discoveries within the video platform, right? And obviously you can do that even if you know a lot. I mean, Johannes, you know Miami Vice super, super well. You have things to say, and yet you can still make discoveries, right? But I think that if when you're getting started, there's an advantage to not having something to say, and then allowing it to be more organic and emerge from the practice. I'm sure my colleagues have other advice as well, including maybe something that totally contradicts what I just said.
My advice would be to follow up on what Jason was saying before about parameters, is to just find some sort of a very clearly defined formal exercise to start with, and just do that. One that, again, helps you put your brain to the side and just follow the parameters. And also, if it's possible, to try to find some sort of a framework, a system, a support system that sets you with a deadline for an excuse for making it. I mean, I played around with speaking about and teaching with video essays, but the only time I actually got around to sit down and make one was when I signed up to an SCMS videographic seminar that Jason gave a few years back for SCMS. And there was also the video essay podcast homework exercises a while ago. And while the TV Dictionary didn't have a specific deadline, it was, as people have said, something that was happening right now. So you felt you had to meet a deadline. So parameters and deadlines, I think it's a good way to get started.
Katie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would just add one other thing, which is pick something you really like. You know, so like don't overthink it. Just think of your favorite TV show, think of your favorite scene, and try and make something on that. I mean, you know, keep the joy in from the beginning, really.
Charlotte, I see your hand up.
Hello. I might have left this a bit late to get an answer. I really enjoyed this panel, and I think it's really fascinating, and I'm a great admirer of some of the work that the people on this panel and the Middlebury College project and Katie's work, blah blah blah. Okay, so I like it all very much, but this discussion has made me think. I wanted to pick up what Katie said about the difference between about videographic criticism coming up very much in relation to cinema and fetishism, and I wanted to think about the relationship between this project, which I think is a brilliant project, and television. Because in some ways it seems to me to be sort of counter television. It seems to me to be its materials are television. Now I don't think that's a problem, but I just say it's like I haven't got a view. Yes, I just wanted to play around with it. I mean, Jason has already raised this, thinking about questions of temporality and duration. and I think Elka has tried to raise it as well by talking about questions of the schedule. Was it you and somebody else? Yes, Eleni talked about flow. So there's something about television that escapes this project. I'm not saying that it has to be in it. I'm not saying that. I just wanted, if I'm interested in what people think. This seems to me a bit more like TV poetry, or yes, it's anyway, that, so I don't get to a point. It's just something to do with it. There's something about it that intuitively seems to me goes in the opposite direction to the medium that it's partly about. I don't know if anyone wants.
Yeah, Johannes, do you want to dive in?
Yeah, I mean, just to immediately respond to that, I really love this this point, and I think it even hits to something that is for videographic criticism in general, kind of like a very interesting thing. Namely, as I said, I'm particularly interested in questions also of like repetition, and but the paradox is that the video essay and my video essays also in particular are highly linear, that not at all kind of like I made a video essay about loops and it included loops, but itself, the video essay was the very contrary to a loop. It was literally kind of, you had to start at the beginning and come to an end. And I totally agree. And actually, I think that's also something that I found so interesting in the TV dictionary, precisely that by trying to do something that in a way, yeah, is again also if we think about, okay, if it is possible to boil down a whole TV series into just one word, why then even bother to watch the whole series? Why not just like read the dictionary entry? So I think it's kind of like paradoxically, it was also a really interesting, what makes it so interesting, I think, to pick up on what you said, that precisely by doing something that kind of like works counter the object, it, of course, something becomes very clear to me about the object. Also, kind of like also what you mentioned, Katie, the fetishistic aspect. I think that's really also, that's very much like the paradox, because like the fetish is at the same time something that we extract and isolate, but then at the same time, it only works in kind of like in a constellation with other things. The fetish just for itself would no longer be a fetish, and that's kind of like I think that's very much also the paradox I see, or at least I personally I see also as being at work in videographic criticism as such. It's kind of like strange. We're dealing with things that work in a very different temporality than those video essays we make about them.
I think another thing that comes to mind in your comments, Charlotte, is that I agree with you in many ways that this project, but first thing, I agree that it is TV poetry, and I'm all for that, right? You know, I think that's a great thing to be making. Not exclusively the only way to talk about TV, but I think that's great. I think it also hits on the fact that right now TV itself is not TV, right? It is so transitional. There is still traditional linear television that you can turn on and see what's on and have the flow and have that experience. But for many people, that's no longer the dominant or even a possible way to watch television. I no longer get linear television. I only have a bunch of streaming platforms and a variety of ways of getting television files, really, you know, streaming files, which is, yeah, it's not what television was. So I think the question is there a way to capture that facet of television in this type of work? And I think there is, but no one seems to have done it quite yet, but I think people could. But also that we can capture some of the ways that television exists today, which, you know, in some ways has overlap with cinema, but is also distinct, right? You can't binge cinema, right? Whereas the binge watch of a series is very much a sort of dominant way of that many people consume TV today. So in some ways, I think that yeah, we are sort of having to deal with the fact that we're dealing with an object in transition and diversified, right? Because there's still so much. I mean, I would love to see someone do a TV dictionary project about television news, right? Like, what would that be like? That's a totally different mode, but obviously vital aspect of television. You know, home shopping channel. You know, I think there's so many possibilities of what television is that could be explored through this model. So again, I call on the people in this room to make something that pushes those boundaries. I know that the clock is ticking down here. Any last words from anyone?
Well, for finishing, I'd just like to invite everyone to contribute. The collection is always open. We're always welcoming new entries. And we're also trying to focus now on some student work and undergraduate or graduate work. If anyone's working with students on videographic criticism, you might be interested in just posted a link. There might be an interesting collaboration for publishing, opportunity for publishing student work focused on the TV dictionary sometime in the future in transition. So hit me up.
And just really quickly, also if you find the prospect of having to do a video essay as being like too overwhelming, as I mentioned, what I did with the high school teachers, even just the idea of what is the key word for this whole TV series is just a brilliant idea. And as you, Ariel, also discussed that with Will in the Video Essay podcast, it's interesting. I think you're right. It's an even more intriguing idea for a TV series than for a film. And so I even think, even just for that, even if you don't even envision making an actual video essay, but just also this idea, what would be the word that you would, if you would make a video about that, what would be the word that you would choose? I think that in itself is really an interesting prompt, highly productive.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for attending in whatever time zone you're in, and thank you, Elke, for running the back end and making sure everything works fairly smoothly. So that's great. And we hope to gather potentially in the future in person to watch and discuss such projects. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. And our next session is tomorrow morning at, let me just double check. I think we start again at 9 o'clock British summer time. So have a good night. Yes, we start at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning for a panel on the contemporary importance of past television. So if you're not asleep, which if you're in America, you're absolutely allowed to do join us. See you then. Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Just great job, Ariel, putting this together. I thought it went off wonderfully.